At 60, Dr. Evelyn Reed had faced bullets and bombs. But in a room of elite SEALs, her greatest battle would be fought against their mockery. Her weapons. A medical kit, and 3 simple words from an old friend. Dr. Evelyn Reed pushed open the heavy steel door to SEAL Team 7's briefing room, a slight, almost imperceptible limp in her right leg announcing her arrival before she did. It was a souvenir from Desert Storm, a permanent reminder of a war fought when most of the men in this room were still in diapers. Her silver hair was pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun, and the lines etched around her sharp blue eyes were not from smiling. The room hit her like a physical force, a wall of sound, smell, and swagger. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of energy drinks, the metallic tang of weapons oil, and the raw, unfiltered testosterone of a dozen elite warriors in their prime. They were scattered around a battered conference table, a pack of modern-day Vikings, all corded muscle, tribal tattoos, and casual defiance. Every single one of them turned to watch her slow, deliberate walk to the podium. At the head of the table, Commander Marcus Thorne rose to his feet. He was a man carved from the same era as Evelyn, his temples graying, his face a roadmap of deserts and deployments they had seen together, decades ago. "Gentlemen," Thorne's voice cut through the low chatter, carrying the easy authority of a man who'd earned his command. "This is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She's our new senior medical officer. She'll be briefing us on the medical protocols for Operation Nightingale." A low snort came from the largest man in the room. Chief Petty Officer Kyle, Viking, Sorensen, a mountain of muscle with a mane of blonde hair and ice-blue eyes, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over a chest as broad as a barricade. "Is this a history lesson?" he muttered to his neighbor, just loud enough to ripple through the room. "Did we bring in a museum exhibit?" A few suppressed chuckles followed. Evelyn's jaw tightened, a barely visible flicker. She placed her ruggedized laptop on the podium, her movements measured and calm, ignoring the jibe. She'd faced down enemy patrols with nothing but a sidearm and a prayer. She wasn't about to be rattled by a boy who confused arrogance with strength. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear, carrying a gravelly undertone of authority that decades of service had forged. "Intelligence for Operation Nightingale suggests we're walking into a humanitarian crisis masquerading as a combat zone. The insurgents are using civilian hostages as shields, and those hostages have been without adequate food or medical care for 8 weeks." She clicked to a slide showing grainy satellite images. "We can expect severe malnutrition, advanced infections like diphtheria, and acute psychological trauma." "When the shooting starts," Sorensen interrupted, not even bothering to raise his hand, "are we supposed to offer them chamomile tea and a therapy session, Doc?" "When the shooting starts, Chief," Evelyn countered, her eyes locking onto his, "you will be dealing with blast injuries from improvised explosives, high-velocity gunshot wounds, and the kind of arterial bleeds that will kill a man in under 3 minutes. My job is to ensure you know the difference between saving a life and just slowing down a death." Sorensen smirked, a flash of white teeth in a tanned, confident face. "With all due respect, ma'am," he said, dripping condescension on the word ma'am, "we've been patching holes in ourselves since before they invented your techniques. I'm just concerned some of that knowledge has probably gathered a bit of rust." The room grew tense. This was a direct challenge. Evelyn paused, her finger hovering over the trackpad. The silence stretched, taut and electric. She could feel Thorne's gaze on her, waiting. She chose a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. "A fair point, Chief Sorensen," she said, her voice dropping into a dangerously quiet register. "So let me ask you. When was the last time you, without Google, without a fancy new gadget, diagnosed the difference between a femoral and a brachial artery bleed by feel and experience alone, with bullets flying past your head?" The room didn't just go quiet, it felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. Sorensen's smirk vanished, replaced by a flat, hard stare. Evelyn had just returned his volley with a cannonball. And for the first time since she'd entered the room, the Vikings were silent. The Mojave Desert was a brutal furnace, a sprawling canvas of scorched earth and shimmering heat waves. For 2 days, the temperature had relentlessly hovered at 115 degrees, and the 48-hour continuous training exercise had stripped SEAL Team 7 down to raw nerve and instinct. Evelyn, her uniform soaked through with sweat and her old hip injury aching with a dull fire, felt more at home here than she had in the air-conditioned briefing room. She knelt beside a training dummy in the center of their makeshift kill house, a labyrinth of shipping containers and plywood. The scenario was a SEAL's nightmare, a teammate down with a sucking chest wound, active shooters, and a non-existent window for medevac. "Gather round," Evelyn called out, her voice cutting through the dry desert air. The team formed a loose, wary circle around her. Their faces, smeared with sweat and camouflage paint, were masks of pure exhaustion. "This is a tension pneumothorax," she began, pointing to a hole in the dummy's chest. "A bullet punctures the chest cavity, air gets in but can't get out. It builds up, crushes the lung, and then shoves your heart to the other side of your chest. You die from cardiac arrest in less than 5 minutes." She held up a long, thick needle. "This is a 14-gauge needle catheter. You insert it here," she pointed precisely, second intercostal space, midclavicular line. "You go 1 inch too low, you hit the heart. You miss the space, you're just giving him another hole. You need to feel for the pop as it enters the pleural space, and listen for the hiss of escaping air." Sorensen, who had been ostentatiously cleaning his rifle, looked up. "Sounds complicated, document. We've got these new auto-injectors now. Just jab it in, problem solved. Faster. Modern. Those injectors fail 15% of the time in dusty conditions, Chief," Evelyn replied without missing a beat. "And in this scenario, your modern solution is back at base. Your teammate has 90 seconds left to live. The only thing between him and a body bag is your hands and this needle." She began to demonstrate, her hands moving with an unhurried grace. "You have to guide it over the top of the third rib, because the neurovascular bundle runs along the bottom of the rib." "Jesus, Doc, you're making a science project out of it," Sorensen interrupted, standing up and dusting off his pants. "Stick the needle in the chest, air comes out. How hard can it be? We're not med students." A few of his teammates chuckled, a wave of agreement rippling through the group. The exhaustion and the heat were making them reckless. Something inside Evelyn, a wire that had been stretched taut for days, finally snapped. It wasn't the personal disrespect. It was the casual, arrogant dismissal of a procedure that had saved countless lives, lives she had personally witnessed being saved or lost based on this exact knowledge. This wasn't ignorance. This was a desecration of the sacred trust between soldiers. "Fine," she said. The word was deadly quiet. She stood up, brushing the sand from her knees with sharp, angry motions. "You think it's so easy? Let's find out." Before Sorensen could react, she grabbed the front of his tactical vest with both hands. Her grip was like steel. "You're the patient now, Sorensen," she snarled, her face inches from his. "You've got a sucking chest wound. Your lung is collapsing. And you have exactly 90 seconds before your brain starts to die from oxygen deprivation." She shoved him back, and he stumbled, genuinely shocked by her sudden aggression. She tossed a sealed medical kit at his feet. It landed with a soft puff in the sand. "Everything you need is in there," she said, her voice like ice. She pulled out her own watch. "Clock starts, now. Show us all how it's done, Chief. Show us your modern way." The entire team froze. This was no longer training. This was a trial. Sorensen looked around, his face flushing a deep, mottled red under his camouflage paint. He saw no support in his teammates' eyes, only a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. "This is ridiculous," he grumbled, but he knelt and ripped open the kit. His massive, confident hands, so adept with a rifle, suddenly turned into clumsy blocks of meat. He fumbled with the sterile packaging of the needle. He pulled it out, its plastic sheath shaking in his grip. 75 seconds, Evelyn announced coldly. Sorensen looked at the dummy's chest, then back at his own, his brow furrowed in concentration. He pointed the needle at a spot several inches too low. "It goes, here." "Wrong," Evelyn said flatly. "You just punctured his heart. He's dead. Try again. You've got 60 seconds." The desert sun beat down. The only sound was the ticking of Evelyn's watch and Sorensen's ragged breathing. His supreme confidence had evaporated, replaced by a sweaty, humiliating panic. He couldn't remember the landmarks. He couldn't control the shaking in his hands. His pride was a lead weight in his gut, preventing him from asking for help. "Time," Evelyn declared. Sorensen threw the needle down in the sand with a curse. He stood up, avoiding everyone's gaze. "You know what? This is bullshit. We were doing just fine before you got here." Evelyn quietly packed her medical gear, her movements precise and deliberate. "You're right, Sorensen. You were doing fine," she said, shouldering her pack. She looked around at the silent, shamed faces of the team. "But when one of you is choking on his own blood in some godforsaken hellhole, I want you to remember this moment. Remember what fine felt like, when you couldn't save your own life with a simple needle." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her lone figure receding into the shimmering heat, leaving 12 of the world's most elite warriors standing in a silence more profound than any desert. The Black Hawk helicopter bucked and shuddered as it descended toward the chaotic outskirts of a town in Africa's Sahel region. Through the vibrating window, Evelyn watched the maze of corrugated tin roofs and sun-baked mud walls grow closer. Somewhere down there, in that nest of desperation, 2 NGO doctors were being held by a warlord with a flair for brutality. The air rushing through the open doors was thick with the smell of dust, diesel, and dread. 2 minutes, the pilot yelled over the deafening chop of the rotors. Commander Thorne gave a final check of his weapon, his eyes scanning the faces of his team. Whatever tensions had festered in the desert were now buried under layers of focus and adrenaline. They were professionals. When the bullets flew, personal grievances ceased to exist. As they prepared to move, Evelyn caught Sorensen's eye. For a fleeting second, she saw not arrogance, but a flicker of something else, apprehension, maybe even a sliver of respect. The helicopter touched down in a blinding swirl of sand and debris. "Go, go, go!" Thorne commanded, and the team poured out, melting into the narrow, winding alleyways with practiced fluidity. Evelyn stayed tight on Thorne's 6, her mind a running catalogue of medical threats: open sewers breeding infection, rusted rebar promising tetanus, the ever-present threat of IEDs. The streets were unnervingly silent. Thorne's hand went up, signaling a halt. He peered through his scope at the target building, a 2-story concrete blockhouse. "Overwatch, talk to me," he whispered into his radio. "Negative movement, boss," came the reply. "Place is a ghost town. I've got a bad feeling." The world didn't explode. It was erased. The IED, cunningly built into the compound's perimeter wall, was triggered by an invisible pressure plate. The blast wave was a physical punch of compressed air and sound that lifted Evelyn off her feet and threw her into a pile of rubble. Her ears screamed with a high-pitched tone, her vision swam, and the taste of copper and dust filled her mouth. A hot spike of pain shot up from her right hip, her old friend from Desert Storm, screaming a vicious hello. But through the pain and disorientation, her training kicked in. Assess. Prioritize. Act. Through the choking dust cloud, she saw shapes moving. Thorne was up, shouting orders. Walsh, the demo expert, was sitting up, dazed but alive. Then her eyes found him. Kyle Sorensen. He was sprawled motionless near the crater where the wall had been, a dark, glistening stain spreading rapidly across the front of his fatigues, just below his tactical vest. The stain was growing with a sickening rhythm, in time with a heartbeat she knew was fading fast. "Man down!" "Medic!" someone screamed, but Evelyn was already moving. She ignored the searing pain in her hip and scrambled over the debris-strewn ground, her heavy med pack bouncing on her back. Gunfire erupted from the windows of the target building, a choreographed ambush. The blast was meant to cripple them, the bullets were meant to finish the job. Covering fire. Thorn roared, and the world dissolved into a storm of return fire as Evelyn reached Sorensen's side. One look told her everything. A large piece of shrapnel from the concrete wall had acted like a blade, slicing through his groin and severing his femoral artery. Blood was not leaking, it was pumping, a pulsating, obscene fountain of crimson that was pooling beneath him on the thirsty ground. He had maybe 3 minutes. Maybe. Sorensen. Kyle, can you hear me? Evelyn shouted, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands were already ripping open her med pack, her mind racing ahead of her fingers. His eyelids fluttered. His ice-blue eyes were glassy, unfocused with shock. Doc, what happened? He gasped. You're hit bad, she said, her voice a strange mix of calming reassurance and urgent command. She tore away the shredded fabric of his uniform to expose the wound. It was a mangled, horrific mess. I'm going to fix you. Just stay with me. Bullets whined overhead, chipping away at the rubble around them. The firefight was a raging symphony of destruction, but for Evelyn, it faded into a distant hum. Her entire universe had shrunk to the space of this bleeding wound and the life draining out of it. She needed to apply direct, targeted pressure to the artery, high up in the groin, but the angle was awkward and her hands were already slick with his blood. Doc, Sorensen rasped, his voice weak but insistent. The protocol. Cat tourniquet, high and tight. Evelyn gritted her teeth. Even now, bleeding to death, he was trying to tell her how to do her job, reciting the basic training manual. A standard tourniquet wouldn't work here, the wound was too high, too complex. It required a specific junctional pressure technique he had never learned. Kyle, just be quiet. Let me work, she pleaded, trying to position her hands. No, listen, he interrupted, his blood-soaked hand weakly trying to grab her arm. I saw this, in a brief, you have to use the windlass, 7 twists. A ricochet screamed off the concrete inches from Evelyn's head. She flinched but didn't pull back. Time was running out. She could feel his pulse under her fingers, thready and fast, growing weaker with every second. His misguided help was costing him precious seconds. His blood pressure was plummeting off a cliff. Sorensen, please, she begged through clenched teeth. You need to let me. Doc, the leg, you have to elevate. Sorensen. Commander Thorne's voice wasn't a shout, it was a weapon. It sliced through the chaos of the firefight, the pain, and the panic with the absolute finality of a judge's gavel. He was looking directly at his dying subordinate. Let her finish. The 3 words were not a request. They were a tactical nuke detonated in the middle of the firefight. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Sorensen's mouth snapped shut. His eyes, wide with shock, finally focused on Thorne, and the order penetrated the fog of his pain. The frantic chatter on the radio went silent for a beat. The rhythm of the teams covering fire became more focused, more intense, a deliberate shield of lead being built around Evelyn and her patient. In that sudden, crystal pocket of clarity, Evelyn's hands moved. Her old, wrinkled, steady hands. They found the precise pressure point inside the wound, high against the pelvic bone, and locked on with a force born from decades of experience. The gushing torrent of blood slowed to a trickle, then stopped. His pulse, faint as a butterfly's wing, stabilized. Hemostatic gauze, now, she commanded calmly, not looking up. Walsh was there, pressing the package into her hand before she finished the sentence. I need an 4-line. Saline lock. Get it ready. Her voice was the calm center of the storm. She was no longer the outsider, the old woman, the museum exhibit. She was a trauma surgeon in her operating theater. The team responded without question, their actions becoming extensions of her will. She worked, her hands a blur of practiced efficiency, packing the wound, securing the pressure dressing, saving his life. And as she did, she could feel the tectonic plates of respect and hierarchy shifting beneath her knees, grinding into a new and permanent alignment. 3 weeks later, the sterile quiet of the medical bay at Naval Special Warfare Command was broken by a soft knock. "Got a minute, Doc?" Evelyn looked up from her paperwork. Kyle Sorensen stood in the doorway, leaning on a single crutch. The swagger was gone, replaced by a careful, deliberate posture. His trademark confident grin was absent, leaving his face looking younger and more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Of course, Kyle." "Come in," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her desk. "How's the leg?" "The surgeons said you performed a miracle." They said another 30 seconds, he began, sitting down heavily. He stared at his hands for a long moment, struggling to find the words. "Listen, Dr. Reed. Evelyn. I need to." He took a deep breath. "I was an ass. No, that's not strong enough. I was a goddamn fool, man. From the first moment you walked into that briefing room." Evelyn set down her pen, giving him her full attention. "And it almost got me killed," he continued, his voice raw. "I was lying there, bleeding out, and I was still trying to tell you how to do your job. What kind of arrogant idiot does that? I was quoting from a damn PowerPoint presentation while you were trying to perform surgery in a firefight." "You were in shock, Kyle," she offered gently. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Let me finish." The irony of his own words hung in the air between them. "I've had a lot of time to think, lying in that hospital bed. And I need to be honest. It wasn't just about your methods. It wasn't just that you were a woman." He finally looked up, his blue eyes holding a truth that was clearly painful for him to admit. "It was that you were older. I looked at you, and I think I saw what I'm afraid of becoming one day. Old. Slow. Maybe, irrelevant. And instead of respecting the decades of experience you had, I mocked it. I was a coward, and I projected my own fear onto you." The confession was so blunt, so stripped of ego, that Evelyn was momentarily speechless. The Viking was gone. In his place was just a man, confronting his own fallibility. "The real tragedy, Doc," he said, his voice dropping, "is that I wasn't just risking my own life. I was risking yours. The mission. The hostages. All because my pride couldn't handle the idea that someone who didn't look like me, or my teammates, might actually know better." "We all got out," Evelyn said quietly. "The hostages are safe. The mission was a success." "The mission was a success," Sorensen corrected her, "because Commander Thorne shut me up and let you do what you were born to do. If he hadn't." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew the ending. Before Evelyn could respond, Commander Thorne himself appeared in the doorway, a rare smile on his face. "Sorry to interrupt this touching scene," he said, "but we've got a situation down in briefing room 2. Evelyn, I think you're going to want to see this." They followed Thorne down the corridor, where a small crowd of operators was gathered outside an open briefing room door. Inside, a young female naval officer, a cyber warfare specialist barely in her mid-20s, stood at a podium. She was attempting to explain the critical threat of a new piece of Russian signal jamming technology. And she was being relentlessly heckled. "So you're telling me a line of code can take out my comms?" A burly Marine gunnery sergeant boomed from the back, his arms crossed in a perfect echo of Sorensen's past defiance. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, you spend your war in an air-conditioned box. Out here in the real world, we deal with bullets, not bites." The young officer's face was flushed with a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. She tried to continue, but the gunny cut her off again. "Maybe you should stick to fixing the Wi-Fi, sweetheart. Evelyn felt a familiar, cold anger rise in her chest. She took a step forward, ready to intervene. But a figure moved past her first. It was Kyle Sorensen. He walked into the room, his crutch making a soft, rhythmic tap on the linoleum floor. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the gunny. He looked at the young lieutenant. Then, in a voice that was calm, quiet, but carried the weight of a near-death experience, he spoke to the entire room. "Let her finish." The effect was electric. The gunnery sergeant's mouth snapped shut. The snickering died. Every person in that room, from SEALs to Marines to Air Force PJs, knew the story. They knew what those 3 words meant. They weren't just words anymore, they were a code. A symbol of a lesson learned in blood and dust. The phrase had become a shield for expertise against prejudice, a cultural shorthand for, "shut up and listen." The young lieutenant, though confused by the sudden, reverent silence, seized the opportunity. She completed her briefing, and this time, the questions that followed were intelligent, insightful, and respectful. As the room cleared, Sorensen turned to Evelyn, a wry smile on his face. "Funny," he said. "It's a lot easier to say those words when you're not the one bleeding out." The story of "let her finish" spread through the special operations community like wildfire. It became a quiet mantra of cultural change. A year later, Evelyn, now a consultant for SOCOM medical protocol development, found a handwritten note taped to her computer monitor. It read, "Doc, thanks for not letting me die of my own stupidity." That phrase is bigger than all of us now, but it started with you having the guts to do your job when we were all too dumb to let you. Kyle. Below it, in Thorne's familiar scrawl, was another line, "The moment that silenced a SEAL team became the voice that changed everything." Well done, Evie. Evelyn looked out her window at the training grounds, where a new generation of warriors, men and women of all ages and backgrounds, were learning to fight together. She realized that the most important battles are not always fought with guns. Sometimes, they are fought for the soul of a culture. And sometimes, a revolution can begin with 3 simple words. Have you ever seen expertise dismissed because of prejudice in your life or at your workplace? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can learn from each other's experiences, and please, always comment with respect. If Evelyn's story moved you and you want to see more content that celebrates courage and conviction, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.